It teaches us that people should focus only on what they can control, accepting external events, focusing on cultivating virtue, logic, and self control to achieve inner peace. What Stoicism does not say, it doesn't push you, it doesn't force you to feel, it doesn't say don't feel, it doesn't say push through, it doesn't say be unbothered at all costs. What Stoicism does say is feel fully, discern wisely, and act intentionally. Now, the early Stoics understood this, something modern neuroscience would confirm, and that is emotional chaos doesn't come from feelings. It comes from interpretation, it comes from perception, and it comes from a threat response. Suppressing this dysregulates the nervous system. Discernment settles it. So, how do we rest, or how do we determine that distinction? Welcome, beautiful souls, to another episode of Unfiltered Soul Shift. Today, we're going to start the episode a little bit differently. If you can, depending where you are, I just want us to ground a little bit, right? So, if you can, if you're driving, obviously don't do it if you're driving or if you're in an unsafe place. But when you have a moment, take a breath before we begin. Not to empty your mind, but to arrive in your body. This episode is about Stoicism. It isn't becoming less sensitive, it's not about that. But it is about becoming less ruled by what you cannot control. And for a sensitive nervous system, that distinction changes everything. Now that we're grounded, it's just a few things I want to clear up, right? So the dictionary description of Stoicism will say it was influenced by Socrates and the Cynics. It teaches us that people should focus only on what they can control, accepting external events, focusing on cultivating virtue, logic, and self control to achieve inner peace. What Stoicism does not say, it doesn't push you, it doesn't force you to feel, it doesn't say don't feel, it doesn't say push through, it doesn't say be unbothered at all costs. What Stoicism does say is feel fully, discern wisely, and act intentionally. Now, the early Stoics understood this, something modern neuroscience would confirm, and that is emotional chaos doesn't come from feelings. It comes from interpretation, it comes from perception, and it comes from a threat response. Suppressing this dysregulates the nervous system. Discernment settles it. So, how do we determine that distinction? So, what is something that's controlling us between what is something that is influencing us? Stoicism rests on this one powerful distinction. There are things that you can control, and there are things that you influence. There is a vast amount that needs to be released in between. Now, the sphere of control is usually to do with self. So, your breath, your interpretation of things, of your surroundings, of things that have happened, your response, so how you respond to influences or how you respond in certain circumstances. Your boundaries is also another thing you can control. Influence is things like conversations, outcomes to a certain degree. So, not always, but sometimes you can influence outcomes. You can also influence other people's reactions sometimes. The things that need to be released, other people's nervous system. You do not control other people's nervous system. You do not control the past, and you do not control the outcome after you've acted with integrity. Now just sit on that for a bit. If you are acting in an acceptable and correct way, okay, I mentioned acting with integrity, you will personally not question yourself. And if you're not questioning yourself, your own motives, that outcome is not something you can control. You've acted as you can, your response. The outcome after you've acted in that with integrity in that moment is not something you can control. So other people's actions. Now, for a sensitive system, trying to control what isn't yours really does create chronic vigilance, right? And chronic vigilance, to a certain extent, is a trauma response. It requires us always to be on. It requires you to always to be vigilant of your surroundings, of your emotions, of other people's emotions, inadvertently allowing you or wanting you to actually control the situation. And ego speaks to controlling the situation, it speaks to external factors. Stoicism ties in that it gives you permission to stand down. It ties in to the nervous system work that we've consistently spoken about. So I have been reading up on Stoicism. I've discovered a few podcasts over my time in my research and in my journey to become a whole me, right? Whatever this may look like. Nervous system regulation is possible through philosophy as well. And this is where Stoicism meets the somatic lens, right? Now, somatic therapy is also something we've spoken about. And remember, with somatic therapy, it's connecting and using movement to release. It allows us to anchor by releasing that tension in the body. When you anchor into, I've done what I can, or this is outside my governance, or my role is my response, not reaction, your nervous system actually receives a signal from you. And that signal will be, I'm safe, I am not in danger, I am stable. Now, using those philosophical tools can become a regulation tool, right? There we go. It is a regulation tool, it isn't an intellectual exercise. It's a cognitive safety point paired with bodily calm. Now, how do we ensure that we respond instead of react? Reaction is fast. Think of it, right? Something happens, boom, you react. It's fast. Reaction is a protective instinct. It's also unconscious. It happens in the moment. Response, however, is slow, it's chosen, and it's embodied. So, an example that I always use is something happens. Do you react? So, does emotion take control? Do you default into protective stance and let your unconscious speak for your actions? Or do you take a breath, slow it down, choose what your next reaction or action is going to be? So, hence the reason I say response is slow, it's chosen, and it's embodied. And Stoicism helps teach that pause, right? And the pause really is regulating the vagus nerve, that breath, reducing cortisol, and creating emotional space. Now, response isn't the weakness, it's more regulated power because you're taking that. Just remember, you don't need a thicker skin. You need clearer inner governance. Whether this governance comes from the different philosophies that are out there. Stoicism is one, Kabbalah is another one. There are different schools of thought. Philosophy isn't the enemy to spiritual growth. However, it can be a good regulation tool. It can be a neurological link. It can be a link to your nervous system. So, in closing, an affirmation that we can use to close off your week, to start your week, and any day that you feel you need some sort of grounding or reminder. I govern my inner world. Until next time, beautiful souls, govern your inner world. Remember, response over reaction. Release release that which is not yours to govern. I govern my inner world. Let this be your anchor.